Hey friends, it's Len here from 1A Auto. So today in the studio we have a second generation Nissan Rogue. I wanted to go over some of the top problems that we've come to find, so let's get into it. The first problem that we're going to talk about comes down to poor heat inside of your passenger compartment. You go ahead and you turn on the heater, you want it on hot, you turn on the blower motor. For some reason, it doesn't really blow out very hot though. To solve that, we're going to go ahead and get right underneath the hood. Now the symptoms that we're having for this actually comes down to poor heat coming out of the vents when we're sitting idling. Once we start accelerating or even jump on the highway, the heat comes pouring out like we want it to. That's going to lead me under the hood right here, and the first thing that I want to do is check the coolant that's in the radiator. Obviously, you never want to open up your radiator cap when it's hot. That feels good. We'll lift that up, set it aside. Now you want to take a peek down in here. Make sure that you have some coolant. Commonly, the coolant could be a little bit low. Otherwise, if the coolant isn't low and you're having this issue, it could come down to an air pocket being trapped inside of your cooling system, which could be partly located inside of your engine, part of your coolant hoses, or even inside the radiator or heater core located behind your dash. Now, why would the coolant be low? More than likely, it's due to the fact that you probably have a coolant leak someplace. It might be an external leak, so go ahead and take a peek underneath the vehicle and see if you have any coolant that comes dripping out. If you find a leak, obviously you need to fix that leak. After you fix the leak, the next issue could potentially come in, and that comes down to bleeding the cooling system. If you leave an air pocket inside the system, there's obviously going to be a restriction in the flow of the coolant going through. If there's a restriction, the coolant can't make its way to the heater core, which of course won't make it so it heats up, and you're not going to have any hot air blowing out the vents. So like I said, the two most common reasons why you might not have good heat coming out of your blower motor or out of your vents inside the passenger compartment typically comes down to either a coolant leak, so double check to make sure you don't have a coolant leak, and of course air in the system. Either one of those, you're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and bleed out any air that's inside the system. Commonly to do that, you can just go ahead and jack up the front of the car a little bit so the car is sitting at an angle. That's going to help make it so the air bubbles will make their way all the way up to the top, and then of course they'll make their way out. Coolant will fill up that gap, and then you shouldn't have any issue. Other possible causes for this issue could potentially be a thermostat issue. If for some reason the thermostat isn't functioning properly, it's going to restrict the amount of coolant flow going through the system, so of course there isn't going to be hot coolant making its way to the heater core. Other than that, speaking of the heater core, if the heater core is blocked up with anything, that's going to cause an issue as well. The coolant won't be able to flow through it. Once again, that means that you're not going to have any heat coming out of those vents. Other than that, if the coolant inside the system isn't diluted properly, or maybe it's a little bit too strong, it's going to cause a restriction in the flow as well. That's a little less likely, but it is potentially a cause. Now for our second problem, we're going to talk about transmission issues. Specifically on this one, it has a CVT transmission, which essentially means it can seamlessly change through a continuous range of gear ratios. Some of the symptoms that you might happen to find if you're having an issue with your transmission might be something as basic as shaking or shuddering under acceleration, or even some kind of jauncing. Essentially, you go ahead and you step on the gas, it doesn't seem like it wants to go, then it does, then it does, then it doesn't. Off and on, back and forth, and it just doesn't really feel like it's very fluent, and it doesn't feel comfortable at all. So let's talk about some quick fixes for this. The first thing that I would want to do is try to check and or replace the transmission fluid. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that you're using the proper fluid. If you go ahead and use any other type of fluid besides what's recommended by Nissan for this particular CVT transmission, you could potentially cause even more damage than what's already happening now. The proper CVT fluid that you're going to want to use for this would be the Nissan specific fluid. It's NS-3. So you're going to want to get yourself a whole bunch of that fluid and flush out the system. Make sure that you don't have any of the existing fluid that was in there anymore, and it's all brand new fluid. After that, go ahead and take it for a road test. Hopefully that the shuddering and everything else is gone now. If it isn't for some reason, typically it's an internal transmission issue. Inside the transmission, there's going to be a valve body that's inside there, and it has a whole bunch of little valves that are going to open and close, which of course is going to help with the range selection of the transmission. Now the valve body itself can potentially go bad internally. To fix this, you're going to have to get inside the transmission. It isn't necessarily something that I would want to do in a driveway. I would of course want to have a qualified service technician take care of it for me. Now a third problem that we're going to talk about comes down to strut caps. The strut caps are going to be located out front of your vehicle, right where your strut mounts to the body. Okay, so I have a strut right here so I can show you. No, it's not the one from inside this actual vehicle because I'm not just going to go ahead and tear it out of there just to be able to show you. But essentially it's going to have a shaft that comes down here. It's going to have the spring in between, the coil spring, and then of course it's going to have the strut that comes all the way up through, and it needs to lead to the strut mount, which is located up along the top. The mount itself is supposed to be in between the spring and the body of the vehicle. So essentially you can still turn the wheel and it's not necessarily going to bind up or restrict you in any way. Now, the strut that I showed you didn't have a bearing cap on the top that made it so it could be able to spin. It's for a completely different application, but I do have a cap here that I can show you. So essentially, just look along the bottom here. Imagine that the spring is sitting right there, and of course, the shaft of the strut is coming up through the center right here. This part right here is going to be mounted to the body of the vehicle. It's going to come right up through into the engine compartment. Now, when I go ahead and turn my wheel, this down right here should be able to spin. So what can happen with this though is as you're spinning, if the bearings that are located on the inside area right here are binding up or rotted or damaged in any way, it's going to cause an issue where you hear some creaking, some grinding, and even some clunking, especially under sharp turns. So what does this mean to you? Essentially, that means that the bearings up along the top right here are damaged. How can that happen? While driving over a lot of bumps, of course, you're putting a lot of strain on everything that's involved. Other than that, if you had somebody try to do any service to it and they went ahead and tightened up the nut that's in the center right there, that's going to crush this bearing right down. And then of course, it's going to put a lot of excess pressure on those bearings and of course, wipe them out prematurely. Now let's quickly talk about fixes for this. For me personally, of course, I'm going to have to replace the strut cap on it. Typically, when I do these, I'm going to do them as a pair. Also, something to think about though, is to get this off of there, you're going to have to take apart your entire front strut to be able to do this. When you do that, it can be very dangerous overall because the coil spring that goes around it is going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure, and if you do it wrong, it could be very dangerous. So in my opinion, if you're doing this in the driveway and you don't have a whole bunch of the proper tools, such as a big old strut compressor or anything like that, it only really makes sense to go ahead and get myself a whole complete assembly, brand new strut, and when I do them as a pair. When I'm done, I get myself a 4-wheel alignment. Now for our fourth problem, we're going to talk about fuel level sensor issues. Now your fuel level sensor is generally going to be located on your fuel sending unit, which is going to be located inside of your fuel tank underneath your car. So let's say you're driving down the road, you think you have plenty of gas, but for some reason the car runs out of fuel. Well, obviously that would tell you that there's got to be an issue with the range selector on the actual fuel pump assembly itself. If it's not functioning properly, the car up at the front right there might think that you have plenty of gas where really you don't. Now real quick, what can happen to this? I'm going to show you on this particular sending unit. It's not necessarily the one for this particular application once again, because I'm not going to go ahead and tear out the gas tank to be able to show you the one in particular. But if you were to look real close at it, where the range selector is, you can tell that it has a whole bunch of little indicators on there. But what can happen over time is the range selector tends to get worn out. As you can tell on this one right here, you can see that all the areas where it's supposed to make its little range selection, well, they're just kind of wiped out a little bit, and that's going to happen over time. Now for a fix for this, you're going to have to get inside the fuel tank, go ahead and remove the fuel sending unit, and of course you're going to have to inspect it. Make sure that there isn't any debris in there. If it looks like it has any type of like a slimy coating or anything like that on there, of course you can try to clean it and retry it. Overall, what it comes down to is you're going to have to replace the unit. Now for our fifth problem, we're going to talk about the canister purge control valve. Symptoms for this that you might happen to find would be a check engine light that comes on in your dash. You go ahead and you grab your little scan tool, you pull the code, and it comes up P0444. Essentially, that's going to tell you that you're having an issue with your emission system, and the issue is going to be located in the rear of your vehicle. Now to start diagnosing this issue, obviously you're going to want to be able to find where the valve's actually located. If you get underneath the passenger side rear bumper of your car, you're going to be able to find a big old black canister underneath there, and on it's going to have a couple different valves. You're going to want to make sure that you're picking out the right valve though. Take a look at all the wiring that goes to it. If you find wiring that looks like it's been chewed through or rubbed through, obviously that's probably the issue. That is actually a common issue. Other than that, you could actually have an issue with the valve itself. If it goes bad internally and it seems like it's shorting out, it could potentially put a little burn in that wire. You go ahead and you touch on those wires, you find like a little swollen area, or even it seems like the outer sheathing's worn off. Commonly it's because it's overheated, and if that's the issue, it's actually the valve that's the issue. So what you'd want to do is, of course, look at the wiring, make sure it looks like it's good. If it is, go ahead and find that valve itself and give it a couple loving bonks just to see if it actually breaks free. Sometimes the little valve inside sticks. Other than that, if it still doesn't seem like it wants to work, you're going to have to go ahead and replace the valve itself. Now, if you did happen to find that there was an issue with the wiring itself, commonly you just want to go ahead and replace the wiring harness that leads to it. Maybe you're a little bit more handy, or maybe you just don't really want to spend that kind of money. If the wiring itself just has like a little rub through area, or it looks like it's broken, just go ahead and cut off that rub through area or the broken area, and then just put in a little splicer there and go ahead and connect it back together. Overall, this should work okay for you, but typically the best case scenario for this would be to just go ahead and replace the wiring and the actual valve itself. Okay friends, so that's pretty much what I've got for you for some of the top common problems on a second generation Nissan Rogue. Maybe you liked the video. If you did, go ahead and smash on the like button for me. It would mean the world. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell. That way there you can be kept up with all of our latest content.